So then, Brian, you might be aware that we are in an election year. We're in an election
nothing
season.
About this.
Fucking
about this.
Terrible. Trust me, you don't want to hear about it. It is awful. It is worse than you thought. And
for real.
It is so bad, in fact, that I feel like I need a piece of this shit. So,
all right, let's get in it.
Because I, for a long time, have been one of these. One of the people who is in the growing cohort of people who is wildly disaffected by the American electoral machine. I voted against Obama in 2008. I voted for Nader because I didn't believe in the two-party system even at that point. Yep. And then since then, bullshit the whole way. It's just been bullshit every time. And so I don't think I voted in the last one at all. Don't remember voting, at least. I tried to vote for Bernie in the primary, and then some bullshit happened, and so I didn't end up voting in the real one. Yeah. So I've been in that camp where it's like, I'm sort of like big on the resistance to the machine and all this kind of stuff, and so voting is nothing at all and doesn't really matter as far as I'm concerned. And then recently, I heard the best argument for electoralism that I have ever heard. So amazing. There is the one argument that no one ever makes, but that is excellent. That is, well, don't vote for the national elections, but vote for your local elections because that's where your vote actually counts. Nobody ever makes this argument, but it's right. And if you were to make that argument, then you would have my ass immediately.
I was going to make this argument, believe it or not, because this is one of the things I think when you get into particularly anarchism, right, in an anarchistic approach, if you have a sort of pacifist or gradualist approach to anarchism, like it becomes very clear that America is, you can deconstruct America and turn it into counties instead of states. And that there's a lot of shit that can't be implemented to hurt your neighbors or do bad things or any of this kind of stuff if you control county. And then there's also quite a lot of good you can do very quickly with very few people showing up if you control the county. So this is that's a branch that has interested me as for political theory for quite a while. But let's hear the other one. I want to hear we can circle back to that one. But let's
yeah. We definitely should circle back to that one because that's the clear winner, obviously. Right. But I was so I don't much consider myself a leftist these days, but I still listen to leftist thinkers a fair bit, and just to like get a lay of the land and see what was going on. And there's this dude named Diallo. I don't know Diallo's last name, but I think he runs a YouTube channel called Black Power Media. And he was doing an interview with FD Signifier. And so these are two black leftists who are sort of working it out. You know what I mean? Like trying to figure out what's really real. And they are in the pro-Kamala camp, not because they believe in Kamala Harris necessarily, but because they think that it is your duty as a resistor to vote in the candidate that you think is most susceptible to your resistance.
Dude, you are quoting a fight I had about 4 months ago that I ended up in this camp. I ended up in this position because of picking my battles, picking who I want to fight. Is a big part of this, but go on. This is no,
that's kind of the point. That's the place where I heard that argument. And I had never heard that before, and I never really thought of it in those terms. And suddenly I was like, maybe it would matter to try to vote for a national kind of candidate if I could get somebody who I thought would be more susceptible than the other person to the kind of resistance that I feel like is important and necessary.
What I think is really interesting about this position is that it combines a couple things that I think are good and have been missing in the way a lot of people who at least think of themselves as leftists have been approaching things. And I do want to give some credit here that this is another case where Jess did a lot of pushing on me with this, but also my good friend Andy and I've had a whole bunch of conversations about this kind of stuff. And Andy is really, really committed to the idea of civic engagement as like one of the ways we make the world better. Like he just like he buys in, right? Like this is and Andy's probably more, I don't want to say centrist Democrat because I don't think that's correct. But I think more like leftist progressive, wants to work inside the system. You know what I mean? Like that's more of his position and believes in progress and this kind of stuff in a very clear way, right? So he and I butt heads a bunch on like, in a very friendly way, to be honest, because he's also very kind, where I would like to take a little more deconstructionist approach to things, right? But in these conversations, one of the things that happened was I got real mad about Palestine this time around.
Very easy to do.
For various reasons, it's not just, including some of the time I spent in Bosnia working with kids who'd come through a war. This is personal to me in a way that is personal for a lot of people, but like became harder and harder for me to find the argument of choose the lesser of two evils in this circumstance. And I had decided I was going to vote for Jill Stein. I was going to vote Green Party.
Okay.
I have a long-standing problem with the fucking Green Party.
Yeah.
The Green Party is the dumbest set of motherfuckers I've ever come across in politics, and it really pisses me off. They had, in Syracuse, they actually had a good machine going. They had figured out that they were going to take over some of the stuff in the city government, and they had taken some of the local stuff together, and they were working real hard to build a groundswell at the local level, control the city, and then move in to start getting some regional people put together. Do you know what I mean? Like building an actual fucking party. Every year, all the money would go into some asshole running for president instead of putting the money into getting a couple congressmen. Like if they just took all the money they throw at a presidential race and we're like, we're going to win 2 districts in Pennsylvania.
Sure.
Like they'd actually have a fucking coalition. You know what I mean? And like half these states, you could hold the entire machinery hostage if you had a voting block of 5 party members that other people had to deal with, right? This is getting back to one of the things I like about the position you're putting forward and that ended up here with. So I was going to vote for Jill Stein. Had a nice like discussion where Jess was pushing me on this, like, are you really going to do that? And because she's like, quite reasonably, not to speak too much for her, but saying like, hey man, the stuff that's on the other side looks pretty scary. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's some pretty scary shit going down there. That's not just like, it's not, I don't think personally, I don't think a Trump presidency would be as harmless this time around as it was the first time around. I think there's a lot more people gathered around in the wings ready to be like, we got some crazy shit to throw down. So, but one of the things that got
I'd like to hear a little more about that.
Yeah. So since one of the things I've been involved with since as a kid was watching the right-wing Christian nationalist movement increase in the country. To the point that like during the 90s when Ralph Reed was running this particular branch of things, they were sending mailers to churches instructing pastors, particularly Southern Baptist white pastors, to tell their congregants they were going to go to hell if they voted for anyone who supported a woman's right to choose. So, and then all about how the Christian family is a strong unit. Do you know what I mean? And like all these posters of like white people in polo shirts and khakis. You know what I mean? Like all this shit. And for various reasons, I actually think those people are really in a good position to do some serious damage in a Trump presidency this time around. There's been a lot more intellectual work done on the right in this issue. And if I think people can get too conspiratorial about the Project 2025 stuff, but if you actually look at what the Heritage Foundation's talking about doing, they have a lot of power and influence at a tech level, you know what I mean? At the sort of like wonk level of government, right? And it would be a fundamental shift in how things go if you got rid of the expertise level. You can have some fights about, I actually think there's a lot of reduction to be done in the federal bureaucracy. I'm not a big fan of that. But switching it to political appointees is bad. That's like, it's real bad. That's end of, that's moves real fast to a world of people don't get services and certain people get excluded and faith tests to get into government real quick, right? So looking at that, because I actually think if you look at the first Trump presidency, again, I don't like him and I don't think he is a good dude and I don't think he has good policies, but less war. Economy was okay. He didn't fuck it up. You know what I mean? Like, you can argue the toss back and forth about what happened with the pandemic until you're blue in the face. You know what I mean? But like,
that largely wasn't under him.
Well, he's the one who came up with the push the vaccine stuff, right? So like, there's a like the vaccine is actually a Trump vaccine, which is really funny because he like brought it out and then they were like, we don't want that, and he's like, me neither. I'm gonna put bleach in my veins, you know, like he just like went totally fucking the other side. There's like I forget. There's like one press conference or like one rally he does. You can actually see it kind of happen in real time where he's like, and we got the best vaccine. It's the best one. You hear the crowd kind of be like, boo, and he's like, we got it right out of here. We got rid of it. We don't have, you know what I mean? Like this is like pivots so fast.
Word.
So, that being said, I'm going to presume there probably is some daylight between Kamala Harris and Joe Biden on Palestine. I don't know that for sure. There seems to be a little bit, but I don't know the extent of it. But I'll tell you what, man, I wasn't about to vote for Joe Biden.
Sure.
Because nobody's there. So somebody's running that show and it ain't Joe. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And
that is currently happening.
Right. It's not going to get better. You know what I mean? Like, and that dude is all in for let Israel bomb the shit out of Palestine. He's all in, you know?
Sure. I mean, this is an American thing, right?
Sure, 100%.
The American political machine is all in on letting Israel do whatever the fuck they want. Seems bipartisan. Everyone is going to be down for that shit.
In fact, it is. And in fact, I'm not voting for my local congressman because I did have a chat with him about this, and he told me that I was wrong, that it was a good thing. And so, like, he's not getting my vote, period. Like, just not happening. That being said, Donald Trump would quite happily turn Palestine into a lake of glass, like that. Like he has said as much. He like my not voting for the Democrats, who I do not like and I do not enjoy, is not going to help those Palestinian kids, at all. I might be able to push Kamala Harris. Do you know what I mean? Like there's an actual voting block. There's people that we can do there. That's a fight I can have.
Okay, so you're on the side of Kamala is going to be more susceptible to the resistance,
or at least I have
on
more
this
power.
Issue.
I think I have more power to fight Kamala than I do Trump, and the surrounding and the descending hierarchies from there, which is the stuff I'd actually.
That's interesting. With. That's interesting. Okay, so what about the whole? So it seems like the idea of free speech is like a right-wing issue at this point, where since 2020, we have seen campaigns against misdis and malinformation. And there has been a lot of sort of like push around government censorship, and like the government knows what is actually true, and so you're not allowed to say whatever kinds of things, and the whole you know, Twitter files thing where the government is like pushing the social media enterprises to boost certain angles and stifle other angles and this kind of thing, like so where does all of that fall out for you when it comes to the idea of like an ability to say things that are resistant to more war and whatever else?
So for me, I think this is a sort of net loss on both sides. Like, so the right will absolutely fight for your right to free speech until their little snowflake hearts get slightly bruised, or you say something about Jesus they don't like, and then all of a sudden all that goes away real quick, right? Like, really,
you think that's true about like an Elon Musk or something like this, who I don't feel like is in the Christian nationalist camp, but who is like a Trumper?
He's a guy who gets real mad when comedians make fun of him. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, like for a guy who's into free speech, his skin's real thin. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And is a guy who has fired people for speaking against him in his companies, and you know, so I don't trust billionaires very much, period. But I don't trust the viewpoint of like, I think Elon Musk is very interested in defending speech that protects or looks like stuff he likes to see out there. And I think that tends to be what's the case for a lot of right-wing critiques of free speech, is that they're into saying things that they want to say. They aren't as into hearing things that disagree with them in a real way. And you see this around the pronoun discussion, by the way, where, you know, I personally do not think that legislating language is particularly useful in any context. I don't think it protects people well. I don't think everything else. I've never understood, however, a right-wing viewpoint that says you can't ask me to address you in the way that you would like to be addressed. Like, from my point of view, you would have, from a right-wing perspective, right? Like, putting that out there. If you're like, I would like to be called this, courtesy would be like, cool, I'm going to do it or not do it, but you have the right to ask me to address you however you want. You know what I mean? Right. Like, so you see the fragility of the right-wing argument there. Now, to put this on the other side for a second, because there is absolutely state violence and danger around free speech from the Democrat side. I'm not even going to call them the left-wing side. It's ridiculous. They're at best a center-right party. You know, and it blows my mind that people who consider themselves leftists are shocked that the FBI is like, you know, undermining free speech in this country. I'm like, where have you been? That's their entire function. It's what they're designed to do. Like, so I honestly don't trust either of them to have power and protect free speech. And so I just think that fight has to happen someplace else. You know what I mean? It's not, I don't think it's going to be done there. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So then coming to the original question is like, how important is it to participate in the electoral process at the national level, you think? Do you think this resistance argument, like, choose a candidate that is most likely to be susceptible to your resistance? Do you think that ultimately, given the Electoral College and given all of the sort of like barriers to a vote actually mattering, like given all of the actual circumstance that we actually live in, does it matter? Does it from the perspective of someone who is disaffected, who doesn't necessarily trust either of these two options, the lesser of two evils, whatever, does it make sense to participate in that situation?
So I think yes, and I have a couple different arguments around it, but I'm interested to sort of unpack them. But to one point, I think that is really important to do to acknowledge here is that there are structural elements in play here that do sincerely limit your ability to influence people at the national level. Like even when you get into sort of like Congress and the Senate, you know what I mean? Your ability to influence those people, if you do not have a shit ton of money lying around, is small, unless you are able to do one of two things, which is either organize quite a lot of people together to care about a topic in a way that can affect, through voting, affect their ability to have power, right? Or if you can basically change the conversation. So I actually don't think that, for example, I don't think there are actually any I won't vote for you if you won't legalize marijuana voters, right? Like I don't think there's anybody who's like who's like a single voter issue with cannabis, right?
Okay.
At the same time, this entire country has changed its conversation on it through a sort of storytelling difference over time. And the other day I heard Kamala Harris, top cop of California, say that she was in favor of legalization. I don't think Kamala Harris is in favor of anything. I think she feels like she can't get away with not being in favor of it.
Sure.
And so the conversation has changed. And from there, that means that because of the way party structures work, when the machine kicks over into a certain thing, everyone down funnel is going to be singing the same tune, right? So this is where we get into what conversations are we having and how do we do it. So this is my what if magic were real take on this, which is that like if you are going to engage with the spirit of the land and of the people and everything else and do this, you need to follow the sacred traditions in the land and of the spirit. And whether you're talking about the U.S. governmental system or the United States as a country, or you're just talking about the fact that there's been a lot of democratic governments and movements and things with indigenous peoples in this place for a really, really long time, getting in the game spiritually and saying, particularly consciously, right? Like I am voting because I think this is the best I can do. Making even if it's a dirty choice, I'm making the best dirty choice I can, but I am also committing to what comes next. I'm committing to engaging through my vote. The vote is a promise to engage, right? Now, if you don't do that, I'm not sure it's worth much in that sense. Because, Andy actually shot me a meme the other day. It was, or maybe it was Jess, but they were passing it back and forth. But it was one of these things that was your average leftist on Twitter says, why should you vote? We should go out and bomb targets, and then won't even like go put a book in a little free library.
Sure.
How many targets have you bombed recently, buddy? Like it's
right.
Because, so it becomes a way to excuse doing nothing. Right. Rather than a way to say, I'll put my effort elsewhere. Because I do have a lot of respect for people who are like, I don't feel like voting. I run a food bank, or I run a free food truck, or you know what I mean? Like, okay, that person has standing. But
sure.
if your contribution is to say no one should vote on Twitter and then you don't do anything, like you haven't committed to the process. Right. And I personally don't want to be that guy. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, so I don't spend any time on Twitter, and I forget that leftists on Twitter exist sometimes. And obviously I make everything about myself, because right, as I should. And so I think less about like this sort of making statements about what other people should do. Like, I'm thinking about, because like I personally don't plan to vote in this election. And I have other reasons for doing that. Not because I'm disaffected and not because I don't want to vote for Democrats and shit like that, but because I don't want to register to vote because I don't want to get drafted later. That's like, so it's not really even about that. But I am in a space where I'm like, okay, well, am I doing harm to myself and my community by making this choice for myself? You know what I mean? And so it's not about like convincing other people that voting is dumb and that we should bomb Target. Of course, we should not be planting bombs.
No.
Duh. But, you know, like how important is the thing to do at all? You know what I mean? And so I do hear you making this argument that Diallo actually made this argument as well, that like if you are to vote for Kamala, then you are committed to resisting Kamala later. Like that's the important bit that you have to do, right? So a vote is a commitment to action in the future.
Ritual action. Ritual commitment.
Exactly. So then there is the like, you know, like I didn't vote for that. So, you know, like where does that, you know, leave you in a situation here? You know what I mean? And you know, like I'm unsure as to the value judgment that could or should be ascribed in this moment. You know what I mean? Sure. In this sort of like space.
So Charles Eisenstein, who
the fucking baddest,
is amazing.
I love this dude.
However,
shit.
Big RFK.
I'm over here dick riding you like, hold on a second.
No. I really love Charles and I love his work. His work has meant a lot to me. His analysis of like the story of separation as probably the biggest problem we're facing right now. And the idea that like doing whatever we can to unpack that and instead start talking about stories of collaboration and togetherness and see, you know, I think it's one of the deep, important philosophical truths of our time and everybody should be wrestling with it and seeking it. He decided this time around to put his weight behind RFK Jr. And see if he could support that. A lot of respect for that, in the sense of like, you know, again, that's putting yourself on the line. It's getting in the game. It's taking actions. And for whatever reason, he made the choice, which is his thing, to sort of overlook a lot of the things about RFK Jr. that I think do make him a difficult person to deal with in terms of someone that you want to be representing the people. You know what I mean? And some of the stuff
like
I'm talking
the Gaza
about,
thing, or
the Gaza thing is a big deal. The casual way in which he has treated so for me, there's a big, absolutely insane sacred moment of like, even if you get the carcass of a bear through roadkill or whatever, and I'm not against taxidermy. I'm not against dudes being like, let's turn this into something beautiful. Well, great. I understand. I grew up with hunters, man. I understand how that can cross your brain and could be the right idea. Dumping it in Central Park as a joke,
sure,
that shows a problem with your spirit on a level that is not okay for me to be represented by, right?
Okay.
And there was he wrote an essay about whether or not he was supporting Trump, which he refused to answer, right? Charles Eisenstein, which I think is the right thing. And he was trying to make a point about the story of separation and about how people wanted to know, are you in the good tribe? Are you in the bad tribe? And that's the wrong question. And it's a good essay. Except I think what he didn't do was what we're trying to do here, which is to say, how do my actions and choices, my spiritual actions, and everything else, where do they start to harm or get in the way or not support the people in my community? You know, and so you've raised, and I think that was a weakness in his position. And I think that's what we have to wrestle with. That even in the story of getting away from separation, we have to think, how am I helping? Like, how am I contributing? You know, one of the things you're talking about here is that you don't want to sign up for the draft. I don't think anybody should have to sign up for the draft. And I think tying it to voting and getting registered that way is some fucking bullshit. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think that's a reasonable thing to say. I'm too weird, fat, and queer at this point for them to want me in the military anymore. Although,
and you're older than I am.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, I'm out of the zone. I don't like. It would be a World War II thing where they were dragging me back in at this point in time,
right? Like, which, you know, like we've seen wild shit going down in Ukraine, and
yeah. I listen. I do not like the games that are being played in the Middle East right now for a lot of reasons, but one of them is like, dude, do not make the wrong. Don't blow up the wrong thing in Iran. Do you know what I mean? Like, just this. We don't.
For real.
Nobody needs this shit. Don't do it. You know.
Mm-hmm. And shit is only escalating from here. And the astrology is terrible.
Astrology is terrible. And
just like the worst possible situation again and again.
I actually had a conversation with a buddy who's a vet, who he works on he's an education professor now and works on research on the school to military pipeline and how recruiting targets, you know, underprivileged kids. Mm-hmm. And, you know, so Jaime is a vet, but he's absolutely anti-war and anti-military, right? Like this is, you know, and he's like, hey, do you think about what you're going to do to keep Wyatt from, you know, the little kid from going into the thing? Mm-hmm. I was like, yep, I got plans. You know, we live in a world where I have plans, right?
Right.
So,
right. Mm-hmm.
So when people say things like, I don't want to be part of the conscription, you know what I mean? Like that's a serious thing to me. You know, it's not a joke. Totally. The question though then becomes, okay, so you're taking that step for yourself. What are you doing to help make sure that no one else has to take that step? Right. Like what are, and again,
okay.
This does not have to be some kind of big protest civil action. This is where Eisenstein, I think, is actually really instructive, that like by spreading kindness, by actively going out of your way to be kind to people, you increase the amount of kindness in the world. You lessen the chance of war every time you are helping your neighbor. Like Eisenstein's right about this. And it's one reason I wanted to bring him up, because I think we think of civic action as only the solidarity and the political protest and this kind of stuff. And I actually think that shit doesn't work very well. So that would be the question there, that like, yes, voting to me is a ritual enactment of a commitment to participate and to be a part of the society and to do this kind of stuff. But how do you feel about the thing I'm throwing your way of like, if you're not going to vote, if you're not, you know, for reasons that are valid, how do you feel the need to contribute to whatever you view your community as in that sense? And how do you think you should go about doing it?
Yeah. Well, so I was actually having this conversation recently with a friend, and the idea of community is a weird one at this point. I don't know that I feel very much part of any community, really. And then I don't know how common that is, you know, like, I don't know how many people there are. Like, I feel kind of orphaned by my family and this kind of thing as well, right? So like a lot of people probably feel like they are part of a community that is their family, right? But there are probably a fair number of people who don't feel that, and who don't necessarily feel connected to their neighbors and this kind of thing, right? Like it is very normal to be standoffish to your neighbors around where I live, at least. Like I do a lot of like waving and like, hey, how you doing? And like get a lot of people ignoring me, and I feel a way about that shit. But it is very common to do so. And so, and what that communicates to me is that none of us really feel like we are part of a community. We may live in the same building, or we may live in the same neighborhood and this kind of thing, but like, we don't really feel like community members, right? We feel like sort of isolated units each. And so then there comes a question about like what it might mean to serve my community. You know, a community that I don't necessarily feel myself being a part of. Like we all are here. We share space, you know, and we share, you know, water and air and land and, you know, like all of these kinds of things. And we would do better to acknowledge those things, right? And one of the things that we frequently talk about on this show is sharing those things with non-human people as well.
Yes.
Right. And so there is community that exists outside. There are neighbors that exist outside of the humanity that is around here as well. Right. We can
very much so
talk to trees and plants and the water itself, the streams, the rivers, this kind of thing. Right. These are people, neighbors unto themselves. And so it's important to be in community with them as much as it is important to be in community with the neighbors who are, you know, on the other side of the wall and this kind of thing, right? And so, but like when you get to that space and like shit gets weird and abstract quick, and you know, like I do a fair amount of like praying and whatever else, you know what I mean, like ancestor offerings and that sort of stuff. But like I don't really know. Like I do what I can to be a beacon of joy and love and happiness, right? Like I experience great despair in my heart on a very regular basis, on a daily, hourly basis. But when I run around the park, then I see some people regularly, you know, neighbors and all this, and they think of me as the happy running guy, right? Because I smile and I wave at them. And like, that is the way that most of my community thinks of me. They like think of me as someone who spreads joy because I'm just like happy to see them. And so I do that, you know, mostly because like it's better for me, you know, like it's better for me. It's not even about being better for them. It's just like, it's just a better way for me to live. And so, you know, is that enough? Is it ever enough, really? You know?
Yeah, is it ever enough is a really great question. I actually tend to think this is a case where like it's the prayer, as you were talking about, is actually really important. And I don't know if people saw Gordon's Substack piece about prayer, but it was some real grade A Gordon White writing. Like, really good.
I didn't even know Gordon had a Substack, if I'm being real.
His Substack's good. He's got good stuff on it. Well, every now and again, I'm like, Gordon.
Is it different from the blog that he runs on?
No, I don't. I think it's largely a repeat of the same stuff.
Okay.
I've been following on the Substack because it's easy for me to find stuff there.
Sure.
But this idea of, you know, praying like a volcano, praying to like make the world new. You know what I mean? Like praying to do this kind of like. I think that if we start with prayer and we start with magic and we start with these things, we get to the next phase, which I think helps us, not next phase, but this starts to happen to you, which makes the question of like, am I doing enough easier? Which is that like you become attuned and aware to the needs and energies around you in a way where like, are we doing enough is a very strong, good question. But the places where you do have power to intervene or are asked to intervene become much more apparent to you. And so you start going through your day and you're like, am I doing enough? And you're like, well, I did help that injured squirrel, and I did tell those kids who were lost that they were heading the wrong direction, and I did do some prayer for that guy who I know is a real dickhead. You know, like I did, you know, me in the mirror looking at myself, be like, we got to do some prayer for you. And you get to the end of the day and you've been doing community things, right? And I think the prayer helps us understand when we are led or called to do something more than that, or when we have an opportunity to do more than that.
Right.
You know, so I do think a sincere prayer practice creates this for you.
Yeah, the spirituality is like my way into community service much more than civic engagement is. And maybe this is because it's easier for me. Like spirituality is like comes kind of natural to me in a way that like reading legalese simply does not. Right.
I think there's a reason that some people, again, like some people are great basketball players. Like they'd be shitty fucking football players. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like
Sure.
not a lot of crossover there. Do you know what I mean? Like not a lot of second careers. We should go where our gifts are. I do far more spiritual work than civic engagement. In part because so when I was growing up, my parents were pretty convinced I would be an excellent politician, and they sort of groomed me to do that a little bit. And yeah, you and I have talked about being the little prince. Like, what does it mean to be the prince? But the truth is that I'm actually kind of a bad candidate in a lot of ways because I don't hide my weirdness. I refuse to hide my weirdness. I'm allergic to the kind of like make nice you probably should do if you're going to represent a large group of people. Like,
sure.
And also for me, it would be making nice with people. And I think for a lot of people, it would just be being themselves. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think they're just genuinely nice people who are really excited to shake hands and kiss a lot of babies. You know what I mean? Like, again, at the local level, I think you see a lot of people committed to actual service for their community and people who are really positive forces in these areas. But the spiritual stuff I'm good at. And I like doing the spiritual stuff, and I can, and because I like it, it's easier, and because it's easier, I do it, and because I do it, I like it, and so those feedback loops are important. In my case, how that plays into the civic engagement, though, is that like I don't really have much time for the curse the president magic. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't.
Sure.
It seems like a very limited view of how to think about applying curses in ways that are actually going to work. But I do magic around my community. Like I do magic around. So one of the things I do is, and I've done for some friends before, is some like law don't see me work, right? For people who maybe don't have enough money to get their car registered or whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's like do some blessing of the vehicles, which I think people might see as an anti-civic engagement. But it's actually like, who is the community? And if you don't think that state violence should be a part of the community, then, well, this is a lot easier to do.
Right. A little pig repellent.
Yeah, exactly. Some pig repellent stuff's good, man. Like, and also like let them do other shit. Like go do something that looks closer to the job you're supposed to be doing. Like stop bothering people about their money. So, but if you ask a hardcore leftist materialist if any of the shit that I do is useful to the struggle, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, no, but fuck those guys.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And there's never a shortage of like, well, did you X, or well, you clearly didn't do this thing that you could have did. You know, there's never a shortage of that sort of stuff, and so I just can't be bothered at a certain point to like try to hold myself to that standard. And that's one of the things that's a reason why I frequently disengage from political conversation in the first place, is because I'm like aware that if we stay in this conversation for long enough, you will find out that I'm the bad guy. Right. You know, like the very first conversation we had on this podcast, I was like talking about how I'm a villain, and it's because I know that, you know, and like other people don't think that about me. Other people think of me as like the happy running guy, you know, like the lady with the baby on her chest that she walks around all the time. She was like, "Hey, you're the happy running guy." I was like, "Yeah, I sure am. You're the cute lady with the baby." And so like, you know, it was we had
a whole freezer full of humans.
Right? Well, listen, she said that I was the happy running guy. I didn't say she was happy. I don't know her life like that. But like what I'm saying is that, you know, I know that like, you know, I am not fit to cast the first stone, as it were.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so because of that, there's a certain amount of like, I don't know, it's going to be what it's going to be that I like end up with over here. And I don't know if that's the right thing, but like, that's where I often arrive.
So I've been meaning to bring this up with you next time you brought up the villain thing. So I'm gonna tangent us for a second because I think you'll like it. I think it's fun.
Okay.
So do you know where the word villain comes from? Like what the actual
Ooh, no, I
etymology
do
is?
love a good etymology game though.
It's my favorite. It's my favorite. Villain basically means peasant. Like it means
From like Villa, like the village, like of the people.
yes,
Is it a
from the
Latin
country
root?
house. Yep. And in particular the older I just looked this part up. I don't have this on top of my brain. I had that part in my brain. This part I didn't know is the Proto-Indo-European root is weak, W-I-K, but referring to the clan, like your family clan unit, like that kind
Oh,
of
okay.
thing.
Okay.
So
Sure.
it all comes out of like the house, the home, the country, right?
Uh-huh.
So when you say like, and the reason we think of these folks as like, oh, they're bad is because of some rich people propaganda. Do you know what I mean? To be like,
Sure. Sure.
they're the enemy.
It's the Lex Luthor versus Superman argument
Yeah,
again.
exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
Like you realize that Superman is like gonna be a problem for everyone.
it's terrifying.
And you were like you're just one of the homies, and you're like, yo, this guy's gonna be a problem. We gotta do something about this.
we got to do something about this, and all of a sudden you're like, man, maybe Lex Luthor makes a lot more sense than I thought about. But so one of the things I think is fun, and we don't have to go too far here. This is most of the tangent. Is to think about when you adopt the term villain for yourself, and you are applying it, and also that people will think of you as villainous, right? One of the things that I think you are actually pulling in from that word is its commoner opposition to the rules, to the society as it has been set up to benefit other people, right?
That's true.
Like, yeah, and I think more people should think about being a villain in a society that frankly doesn't benefit quite enough people and
Right.
and treats us like the enemy. You know what I mean? So
There's like some
that
bog witchery there.
there's some bog witchery, but in this case, but I do think it also calls for getting in the mix a bit. And this is the other thing. So one of the reasons to pull back to this, one of the reasons I wanted to tell everybody I was voting for Jill Stein, even before I had decided to vote for Jill, whether or not I was really going to do it. Like I was in my head, I was like, maybe I'm going to vote for Jill Stein. What I said to everybody else was, fuck this, I'm voting for Jill Stein.
Sure.
And the reason for that was I wanted to push people.
Uh-huh.
And this is the other piece about choosing who you're going to resist, right? You people don't push hard enough and then take a deal. They don't force deals. They don't try to push to get deals. They don't get hard nosed about the deals they're going to take. They just say, well, this is why we've drifted so far to the center right? Is that there aren't enough unions being like, no, I'm not going to take this deal. Oh, I'm going to shut the country down.
Sure.
I'm going to be a villain. Like people were mad as fuck about those longshoremen who were like, yeah, we're just going to not unload boats as we get into Black Friday season. Do you know what I mean? People were pissed. And the news was doing stuff about how they're keeping medicine from people. Do you know what I mean? Like weird how the news is suddenly on the side of big boat owners. But anyway,
Is that sudden?
no. And then you realize that they actually got a deal. Guys at Amazon who were like, fuck this, we're not going to work until we get better working conditions. We're going to shut your thing down in Jersey. They got a deal. Do you know who didn't get a deal is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who immediately came in and had a voting bloc, could have fucking pushed the world, right? Had 6 people, had the squad. We even had a name, a sexy name. Could have forced whatever they wanted onto that Congress. But, lost their courage, lost their heart, got bought out, however you want to say it, but like sold out real fast. And like, I that's a little 90s of me. I don't actually think sellouts is a big a deal. We've talked about this, but like gave up before the fight.
Sure.
Like you should make people want to fight for your vote. You should make that's one of the ways we resist these people is we make them fight for us as an attention economy. Like, voting is another example of the attention economy. And if you want to vote, if you want mine, you gotta buy it from me somehow.
Interesting. I'm not sure that I buy that. Like, well, I mean, in the attention economy, there's like you could like AOC is competing with Sabrina Carpenter.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, and the more that an AOC loses attention to Sabrina Carpenter, the more actual power she gains. Because she can just do shit because you're not really paying attention.
Oh, yes and no, right? It depends who you're trying to get. So, let me back up a little bit here. Oh no, his name just went out of my head. 1 second. Oh, Tip O'Neill. There we go. Okay, so here's another piece. Again, credit to some conversations with Andy about this. But the country got worse when we stopped being so corrupt about entitlements. So the country was better off and less problematic when you could earmark stuff in the budget. So you're the congressman from bumfuck nowhere, and I need to get your vote on something that I need to have happen. And you're like, sure thing. As long as there's $200,000 given to my district for its new waste management plant, I'll vote with you. Sure. Put that little earmark in the bill for my people. I'll vote your way you want to go. Everybody's like, this is corruption, right? And they which it is. And so we put in rules and took out earmarks and did all this kind of stuff. And now corruption happens behind closed doors where a corporation just buys 13 different congresspeople. So they're no longer corrupt on my behalf. They're corrupt on, Big Pharma's behalf. Right. It was better when they were corrupt for me. I got more shit out of it.
Yeah, right.
So, and the people knew who your constituency was, right? Because your lifestyle of being treated like a hero, making a shit ton of money, doing the Charlie Wilson thing of like cocaine and hookers while you're in Congress and everybody being like, stay up there, Charlie, we love you. That goes away when you're a corporate shill, right? And so, but you get different benefits from the corporate guys, like different things there. So who is your constituency? Well, for AOC or any of I'd just basically say almost everybody who's in there right now, it's some kind of PAC or thing, and they're giving you the extra money, the power, whatever, to get what you need to get. So we need to sort of reset. This is my big campaign for more corruption in America. Is we need to reset so that we're getting this stuff back where it ought to be, of fighting from my power plants instead of like fucking Bird from West Virginia put naval bases in fucking West Virginia, dude. It's a landlocked, which I think is just some real serious swinging balls, kind of like earmarking. Right. They're like, you sure you don't want like an Air Force base or like an Army base or something? No, I want you to know I did this to you. I want it to be a Navy base. Sure, so that's what it's there for. I think we'd be better off with that.
Okay. All right. This is the first I've really thought about it, so I'm gonna get that to you. Yeah. Cool. This has been a fruitful and interesting discussion. For sure. And you, the listener at home, should obviously not listen to me. I don't have any idea what's going on. So whatever you thought before this is probably right. But as is our tradition, we typically do a reading for a listener. Sure. And that's actually part of what we do that is useful in the world, is hopefully looking for people who are hanging out with us and getting, like what we do is we do readings. We do divination and fortune telling for folks. And we do that because it is interesting and useful for us. And we hope that it will be interesting and useful for you. So Brenda wrote in and said that I am launching a new business and want to know if it will be a smooth start or a slow and painful one full of lessons. With all the cardinal signs 16-year period of chaos, I am afraid of starting things after so many painful lessons. So what do you think about that? How do you want to approach this question, Brian?
So I object to the nature of the question. Sorry, Brenda. What I object here is already the framing of like, it's going to be good, it's going to be bad. And I get what Brenda's saying. It's actually a very valid question. I'm being a little bit of a dick. So what I decided to read on here was, what does Brenda need to know about the business? About like the starting of the business. Because I think that allows for us to get a better picture of the things I think she's after. And I can jump into mine, or did you want to?
No, I think that I really, maybe it's just because I don't do it, but I think that the geomancy bit is always very interesting, and so I think that you should go ahead and hit it. What does Brenda need to know? Brenda
needs to know that it's gonna be a little messy. It's gonna be a little messy, Brenda. And I hate to say this. And there's ways to think with this that I think will make it easier, right? So the way geomancy always looks at this is like current conditions remaining the same. This is what is arising. Like this is the pattern, which is how geomancy is then like, hey, you might want to lean into this part of the pattern or look at this stuff. But the judgment here is Cauda Draconis, the tail of the dragon, plus Rubius. These are two of the roughest signs in the chart. And what they get when you put them together is a missio, loss. Okay. So what does Brenda need to know about the business? That there's going to be a sort of like a lot of a lot of like frustration, a lot of this kind of stuff that's going to result in loss, right? That's the judgment. The sentence, the result of the judgment, the result of how this comes out is actually acquisitio, gain. And the figure representing Brenda is via, the road. And what this is telling me is that, like, yeah, if you're worried about, like, hey, is it going to be full of lessons and this kind of stuff, it's going to be a little bit of a journey to get to the gain. That's not necessarily a bad thing. There's gain at the end of this journey. Like don't miss that part. It's just that, like, yeah, you're coming in with a lot of, like, no, burn it all down, like things catching fire kind of stuff, and frustration and obsession, and this kind of stuff leads to loss. But when we look at the houses a bit, what we see is that the part of so the via puncti first, the road that runs through it, basically, that says it's about the journey. It goes right back to the first house to via. So it's like, look, you're on a journey. It's a journey. It's the house shit that goes. The part of spirit is in the fourth house. And in this case, which is loss, right? So, like, loss is not great in the fourth house. You don't want, things there to go away. Those are things you want to keep, basically. And that's part of what's happening here. The part of fortune, however, is in the eighth house. And the way I would see, like, a business in this sense, like starting the way that Brenda framed it, it didn't sound like this was a side hustle. It didn't sound like this was, this sounded like a big deal, right? So I'm looking at the 10th house, and the figure in the 10th house is conjunctio, the crossroads. And that's a good one in the 10th house, right? But it is a wheeler dealer. You got to stay on it. You got to be on your shit. Very mercurial, like, kind of thing. It brings money. It brings wealth. It brings connection. But you got to, it's a crossroads market tradesman kind of figure, And so that's the way to do it. The part of fortune, the physical thing to do, is in the eighth house. And so here we're not often talking about death, but we're also talking about, like, debt and taxes and this kind of stuff. And in case of a business, I think that's probably the more relevant read. Here we have Fortuna Minor. This is like just getting by. Things are kind of like we're scooting. We didn't maybe fill out all the forms correctly, but the tax guy didn't notice this year, and it's kind of okay. That's the current situation. That's the place where I would put some remediation, both in the sense of, like, hey, let's get some luck. It'd be good if the tax man doesn't come by for a couple of years. Like, that's fine. Right. But also, like,
maybe a little pig repellent.
little pig repellent, little pig repellent. But also like, hey, if that's the energy that's creating the situation that we're talking about here, that is present in the eighth house, maybe it's time to get a little tight on the books. Do you know what I mean? Like, come at it with a little bit more of like, some serious, again, stay on top of it kind of energy. Don't let that just get all slidey on you. That's where we're going to see some loss moving around. I always like the 11th house for this stuff, the house of help. And in this case, gain is in the house of help and the house of friends.
Okay.
Get your friends involved. Get help from people. Don't try to do this all on your own. This is a thing that's going to need some help, and that there's a lot of gain to be had there. So in a quick summary, it looks to me like things are going to be messy to start. Some of it's the anger and baggage you're bringing to it. Some of it's just literally the world's frustrations arriving on your door, shit you don't need, you know. But you're on this journey. The journey does end in acquisition. It does end in gain. Be tight about your taxes. Honestly, be careful even in buildings. Not careful in a building, but like be thinking about if your business involves a building or this kind of stuff. Like, you know, pay attention to that too, right?
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
But overall,
if you're like doing a brick and mortar.
Yeah, if you're doing brick and mortar, I'd look at the building literally in this case because of the fourth house thing. But the overall here, the energy in of the business itself is a wheeler dealer kind of energy. So lean into that, like be present for that, and then look to your friends because there's a lot of gain to be had from having help in. So if you're on the fence, you're like, oh, maybe I could use some help. Get the help. Like don't wait. Okay. Just start with that. Yeah. So that's my take.
Yeah, great. I love that. Part of the reason why I really like starting with the geomancy is because it's so interesting to see how well it correlates with the astrology. Because, all right, so this is Brenda's chart here. And so we can notice that it's got an Aries rising here. So Aries is ruled by Mars, and we can notice that Mars is in Capricorn in the 10th house. And there's a lot of shit going on here in the 10th house. We got the midheaven, we got Neptune, we got Uranus, we got Mars, we got Sun, we got Venus, all here in Capricorn. So there's a strong emphasis on doing career stuff in general. And there is, to see the ruler of the rising, that's the area of the chart that has to do with who you are as a person, how you get down, how you be in the world. To see that in the midheaven area of the chart does look like you are likely to spend a lot of time in that public environment and trying to get shit done. Like Mars is trying to accomplish aims, trying to move forward on stuff. But we can also notice that this Mars is directly conjunct Uranus, right? And so here, Uranus is going to be full of unexpected things. There's going to be twists and turns, chaos, things, surprises, stuff that you didn't see coming all the time. And so Mars is exalted in Capricorn. And so this is a good, strong position for Mars. And, if you are somebody who wants to get stuff going and move something, then Mars in Capricorn is real good for that. But to see this Uranus here does suggest that there's going to be some weird stuff, and that it's almost like if it wasn't difficult, then would it even be worthwhile? Would it be worth doing? Like you might, if it was easy, you might not feel like it was the real deal. And so there's a certain amount of difficulty that you might have to be kind of grateful for at a certain point, even though it's sort of weird and might suck sometimes. You're going to have to do that sort of stuff. Now, one of the things that I really notice about this season that we're currently in, I don't know when this launch is taking place. This question came in yesterday, October 8th. And so I assume that the launch is going to be happening, within the month or something like this. It's hard to say exactly. But Mars is currently in Cancer. opposite to all of this Capricorn stuff, and it's just going to be grinding across all that shit, and it's going to dip into Leo for a second, but then we're going to see a retrograde, and we're going to get some more Mars opposite all your shit, and then it's going to station direct at 17 degrees right here on the lot of fortune. So that's probably going to wherever, and that's in the 4th house, so we're talking about the same things that you were talking, like the literal building that you inhabit, this kind of thing. Looks like it the whatever fortune or luck you might normally have in that space is not happening. We're looking at difficulty, separation, burning, inflammation, rage, all that sort of stuff in that space. And then we're going to see some more Mars grinding across all this shit, right? So it looks like a time for it, like the initial launch looks like a period of difficulty and shit happening that you didn't see coming, that you thought it might even be something that you thought you finished, because it's a Mars retrograde. So we're going to see some, like, a return to a bunch of stuff, right? So stuff that is especially going on now in this, like, 1st and 2nd week of October, like this sort of stuff that you thought you had established in the beginning of this launch, like, you're probably going to have to revisit all of this stuff, and you're probably going to have to look at it again, and there's going to be unexpected Uranus things going on here, and it might, to see that Mars opposite natal Mars, who rules the rising here. Also, Mars in Cancer is going to be square to natal Moon here, in Aries. Looks wildly uncomfortable. It looks like a time where you're, like, really going through it a little bit, and you might have some, like, health stuff that could come up or something like this. Like, it doesn't look like a comfortable time for you to do your thing. And then moving a little bit forward into the future, we can see that Saturn is going to be moving into Aries here and then hanging out in your rising sign for a little while. And so there's going to be a strong impetus to sort of become more responsible and disciplined about your work. And that's likely to be necessity is the mother of invention, right? And so there's likely to be some bullshit that shows you that you got to stay on point with all of your stuff, right? Wherever you've been skating, you're not going to be able to skate anymore for the next couple of years here. So it looks kind of uncomfortable doing all that sort of stuff. So we can see that there is a certain amount of, like, scruff and rough and tumble nature in this kind of chart, right? Like, if things are difficult, then good. Like, if things were not difficult, then you probably wouldn't value them. And you are, if anybody can handle this kind of challenge, it's likely to be you. Yeah. But then one other thing that I think is really interesting here is that we've got this Pluto we do have Pluto in Scorpio, but also Jupiter here in Scorpio. So Jupiter in Scorpio, one of my favorite things to say about Jupiter in Scorpio is like kind of a dangerous, distasteful or toxic kind of sign, right? It's the sign that has to do with venom and poison and this kind of thing. But Jupiter tends to make things better. There tends to be some kind of improvement that is associated with Jupiter, especially in a day chart like this one. So when I think about Jupiter in Scorpio, I often talk about turning poison into medicine, or one of my favorite examples of this is the plant foxglove, right? Foxglove is wildly poisonous and will kill you immediately, but in a small dose, in the right kind of dose, then it can treat heart conditions. Yep. And so that kind of, like, knowing which dose makes the poison and which dose makes the medicine, that's the kind of thing that Jupiter in Scorpio likes to do, right? And so where you find there is poison, where you find there is difficulty, challenge, and this kind of thing, Jupiter in Scorpio is really good at sort of transmuting that, alchemizing things into something that can be useful, that is worthwhile, especially in the end. And we can notice that this all of this Capricorn stuff is ruled by Saturn, and you've got Saturn here in Aquarius, another sign that is ruled by Saturn. And so there's strong Saturn energy here. And so really we got to be thinking about the long run. So if you end up going through a bunch of trials, challenges, difficulties in the immediate period, then the question becomes, how can I fortify myself so that in the long run, long run, I'm talking about 10, 15 years, talking about being a grown ass, like in that space, how can I become strong and durable so that I can, what can this kind of thing teach me about durability in the long term?
It's funny how we're both seeing long-term stuff, right? Like this period is going to be tough, but long-term we get stuff out of it, or there's an opportunity to get stuff out of it. Like, it's
right.
Yeah.
I like to see a strong Saturn in a day chart. Saturn is, in a day chart, Saturn will typically especially over the long period, the Saturn periods, then like Saturn will try to bring you something nice, and so, Saturn can break somebody with a night chart, you know what I mean? But like in a day chart, it'll give you, it's like, oh Lord, don't give me more than I can bear.
Right.
And there's a certain sense of like, can you take this much?
What about this?
Right. You've been doing your squats, so like,
I do the squats. There's no choices.
Right. Yeah. So like, it looks a little tough, but, especially in your long-term situation, Brenda, I think you can make it. You just got to keep your eye on that long-term.
I will say too, Brenda, that I also have that, Jupiter in Scorpio thing, and since talking to Zamboni about this kind of stuff, it's been really useful as a metaphor for me to, like, not only noticing patterns that show up in my life, but also ways I'm like, oh yeah, if I lean into the alchemizing, things get a lot better pretty fast. So that was in the 8th house, right, Zamboni?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which is where you need to stay on top of some of that tax shit. So, nobody likes doing it.
Right.
But do it in small doses and you're good to go.
We notice that Brenda also has Saturn in Aquarius in the 11th house. And so that's Saturn in domicile in the 11th house, right? And Mercury is there in the 11th house as well, in Aquarius. And so if you need to hire an accountant or something like this, then like look around for your through your community. Ask if anybody knows somebody who's nice in the field that you're in for those kinds of taxes and accounting, because you might know somebody who knows somebody, and if you can get somebody covering your ass in the right kind of way, then that might be helpful.
Double check something here. Yeah. I do love the know somebody who knows somebody as the 11th house thing too. Like maybe not just your friends, but friends of friends, people like that. I think that's a very good way to think with that.
Yeah, I think that second tier acquaintance is a really good way to leverage the 11th house. I've been thinking about this a lot and talking to clients about this a lot recently, is like, like not just your besties, not people that you spend all the time with and their names and but like sort of being at an event, a big event that maybe one of your besties invited you to, but there's a bunch of people around who you don't necessarily know, who there's 2 or 3 degrees of separation between you. Right. Like there's so much potential in that space for opportunities, for, people who could be helped, like people who have opportunities for you, people for whom you have opportunities, like connections can be built in that kind of space. And that's the sort of space where everyone is kind of, it's not a cold interaction, right? Because everybody knows somebody in the space. And so there's like a little bit of warmth there already, where you're not just like, hi, I'm a total stranger. Do you want to help me? Like if you know somebody who knows somebody, then like there's already a toe in the door, and that can help to like make something synergistic happen.
Yeah. As always, my dude, it's real fun to get to do these readings with you, because I start to feel the synergy between them. You know what I mean? Like start to work out, like see what's really in there.
I almost wish we offered a reading like this, but alas, if you go to wilkinsbrian.com, then you can get a geomancy reading. I will not be present for this reading, but you can get these kinds of questions. And what else do you do, Brian?
Oracle decks. I have the Oracle Deccan stuff. Had a really fun session with that recently, working through it with somebody who it was a particular occasion. I don't think it's going to happen this way every time, but they got a ritual and a magic stick out of the reading. So I feel like that's always,
okay.
If those are exciting, the deckhand cards offer a lot of opportunities there for some fun. And I do tarot readings too. I don't have a technical offering, but if you're like, I just want some straight tarot, Brian, I don't want to look at your weird deck. Like we can do that too. But right. But yeah, and there's books, there's writing, there's all kind of stuff available over there for but if I wanted to better understand what was going on in my chart, well, then I would head over to ZamboniFunk.com. And Zamboni, don't you have a class?
I do. October 24th, Astrology from the Ground Up begins. Yeah. And it's going to be dope. I'm super excited about it. This is the second iteration of this class, and this one is going to have a whole workbook section that will go with it. So, so the students will spend time with the material and then immediately apply it to their own chart and do a couple of different readings that way. And then they'll end up doing a reading for someone else as well. You know that I'm over 10,000 readings deep at this point. I'm probably around 11,000 by now. And I stopped counting because I hit my number. But, there is no there's no replacement for reps. If you just do some readings, then doing readings makes you a better reader, and it makes you better at the craft. And the better at the craft that you are, the more applicable it becomes in daily life. Like you just understand what's going on in life. You become a wiser person as a result of that. And so I'm proud of the program. I think it's going to be really great, and folks can sign up for that at ZamboniFunk.com. Of course, if you don't feel like doing all that bullshit and you just want me to read the chart for you, you can do that also at ZamboniFunk.com. Yes, exactly. And you can also find music, and you can find the podcast there. And if you liked the free reading that me and Brian did, you can also sign up for that there at ZamboniFunk.com/store. There's a free option there. You will see both of our smiling faces, and you can get all of that going on there. So thank you, Brian, for being here another time and for entertaining my dumb electoralism questions. You have been a real champ with that. I don't
think they're dumb at all, my friend. I think that's a really, really interesting and good question for people to be sitting with right now. And I'm glad you brought that tonight as something we can talk to, and hopefully some people in the community found it useful. And if you guys want to yell at us about it, yell at us about it.
There's a whole comment section. Orcus has been talking mad shit for a couple of podcasts now, and I welcome that. But so you're welcome to. If you one of the things that I really like about that is that it's clear that she is listening deeply. And she's coming for me in my sensitive spot because she knew where it was at.
Orcus knows her shit for sure.
Right. So,
but a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to ramble down these roads with you and to talk about this stuff. And I hope I hope everybody enjoys as much as I do. So,
yeah, same. Appreciate y'all for being here. We will see you next time. Peace and blessings, family.
Night, everybody.